The Florida Podcast Network, the voice of Florida.
This is Florida Man News, the worst headlines from the Sunshine State on the Florida Podcast Network. I'm your host, Joel Lounds. Coming up in this episode, Florida man gives toll booth workers a tip. Florida woman isn't dead yet. Florida man does some creative landscaping. And Florida man gets really honest with the police. Plus, Florida man trivia and much, much more. Our lead story tonight. A Florida man contracted COVID-19 last week while attending a podcasting conference. The Bonita Springs podcaster attended the PodFest Expo conference in Orlando, where he gave an amazing presentation on creating eye-catching artwork for podcasts. At some point during the conference, the Florida man must have contracted the coronavirus because one day after he returned home, he started to have symptoms associated with the disease. He took a home test, which immediately returned a positive result. Luckily, the Florida man, in addition to being a podcaster, has a career where he actually earns a living wage while working from his home, so he did not spread the virus to his coworkers and only had to take 1 day of paid time off from his main job. However, due to the fatigue from COVID, he was unable to produce an episode of his podcast for the scheduled release date. He was able, however, to write and record the episode a week late and promises to release the subsequent episode on the normal schedule, lest his producer become a feature on the next episode of Florida Man News. In, SunPass. I thought you said, never mind, news. A Florida man has been arrested in connection with exposing himself multiple times while crossing through 7 toll booths across the Sunshine State. On Monday, the 41-year-old Florida man from St. Cloud was booked on 7 charges of exposure of sexual organs. According to Florida highway troopers, the Florida man exposed himself 7 times between August 29th and September 5th of last year as he entered the cash lanes of toll plazas. Toll workers told law enforcement that the Florida man was unclothed and, quote, showing his privates, unquote, according to the arrest report. The Florida man was identified through photo comparison and security footage. Captain Peter A. Bergstresser of the Florida Highway Patrol said that, quote, video that was obtained in this investigation is not yet available and has been sent to the state attorney's office for review, unquote. He did not add, now stop asking for it, Florida Man News, you're creeping us out, although he could have. In Dock Blocker news, something fishy was apparently going on at a dock in Sebastian on Tuesday, and a police officer caught himself 2 suspects. It started with a witness near Riverview Park on Indian River. The witness looked out toward a fishing dock and found a pair of Florida folk in their birthday suits, somewhat occupied, and she ratted them out. According to both arrest reports, quote, the reportee of this incident indicated that she observed the defendant's body part during the course of the 2 having intercourse, unquote. So she called a police officer who positioned himself to confirm her observation. For the Florida man, the officer wrote, quote, upon my arrival, I observed the defendant and co-defendant engaged in intercourse as they were on the fishing dock exposed to the public, unquote. For the Florida woman, he wrote, quote, upon my arrival, I observed the defendant engaged in intercourse as she was on top of the co-defendant, unquote. Furthermore, for the 36-year-old Florida woman, the defendant appeared to be very intoxicated. I observed alcohol bottles on scene during this incident. I could smell the odor of an alcoholic beverage emitting from the defendant's person, unquote. For the 29-year-old Florida man, the defendant was in possession of alcohol during my contact with him. He also appeared to be very intoxicated, with slurred speech and a strong odor of alcohol emitting from his person. Both were taken into custody and charged with breach of the peace, disorderly conduct, which is a misdemeanor. Contrary to the Kid Rock song All Summer Long, it is not legal to make love out on the docks. According to the statute, quote, whoever commits such acts as are of a nature to corrupt the public morals or outrage the sense of public decency or affect the peace and quiet of persons who may witness them, or engages in brawling or fighting, or engages in such contact as to constitute a breach of the peace or disorderly conduct, shall be guilty of a misdemeanor of the second degree, unquote. Both were booked Tuesday evening. The judge released the Florida woman of Sebastian on her own recognizance. The Florida man's bond was set at $500, and he is still in custody. And now it's time for our weekly Florida Man trivia question. Here's this episode's question. Several U.S. presidents have called Florida their winter home, including JFK and Nixon. But what president was governor of Florida before he was elected to the White House? I'll have the answer after this message from our sponsor.
Flintstone Media has been the digital messaging bedrock of several brands and businesses, serving as a highly resourceful podcast production house and consultancy firm for over 6 years. Visit flintstonemedia.com for podcast samples. From show development and setup through recording and distribution, work with a leader in the industry and add a new podcast to your brand's content offerings. That's flintstonemedia.com.
And now, the answer to the Florida Man trivia question. Once again, that question was, several U.S. presidents have called Florida their winter home, including JFK and Nixon. But what president was governor of Florida before he was elected to the White House? The answer is Andrew Jackson. The 7th president of the United States previously served as the first governor of Florida as a U.S. territory, overseeing its incorporation after its purchase from Spain. If you'd like to sponsor Florida Man Trivia, please visit floridapodcastnetwork.com/contact and send us a message today. In Tastes Like Bacon news, a Florida man is locked up in Lake County after he crashed his vehicle multiple times and bit an officer, according to Groveland police. Police arrested the 30-year-old Florida man on Thursday. Investigators said they received reports of a man traveling around the Cypress Oaks neighborhood, slamming into multiple vehicles, hitting a Port-A-Potty, and then crashing into a retention pond. Police said the driver then ran into a marsh, where he was found when law enforcement arrived. Investigators said after the Florida man refused multiple orders to come out of the marsh, police and a trooper entered the marsh to retrieve him. The Florida man struggled with officers and held onto trees as they worked to pull him from the marsh, records show. After he was pulled onto dry land, the struggle continued, resulting in one officer being bitten on the arm, breaking the skin, according to the arrest affidavit. The Florida man eventually requested medical assistance and was hospitalized due to being intoxicated and involved in multiple crashes, police said. The officer who was bitten and the trooper who was also injured in the struggle were taken to the hospital as well. After the Florida man was medically cleared, he was charged with battery on a law enforcement officer, resisting an officer with violence, driving without a license, and leaving the scene of an accident with property damage. The report did not indicate what the officer tasted like or if he had any further complications during the next full moon. In Taking Out the Mail news, a Florida man is accused of blowing up the mailbox of a landscaping customer over a dispute about payment. The Brevard County Sheriff's Office arrested the 29-year-old Florida man on Friday. Deputies say the Florida man showed up at the home on 1st Street in Merritt Island on Thursday evening to pick up payment for landscaping services from the previous owner of the home. However, the owner of the home said he had told the man to come to the house Friday before 2 p.m. because he would not be home until late. The Florida man allegedly talked to the owner's mother, who reiterated her son was not home. Witnesses say the Florida man got back into his black SUV, drove down the road, turned around, put something in the mailbox, and minutes later, it exploded, according to the arrest affidavit. Surveillance video from local homeowners corroborated the witnesses' accounts. Deputies said the explosion not only destroyed the mailbox, it bent a street sign next to the mailbox and threw shrapnel 50 feet from the detonation site. One of the neighbors was outside and nearby when the explosion happened, and pieces of shrapnel landed feet from where they were standing. The Florida man was already listed as a violent felony offender of special concern who was on parole for a previous sentence. He's now facing charges including discharging a destructive device, possession to destruct a device to cause bodily harm, and possession of a weapon by a convicted felon. In your tax dollars at work news, Betty Ashley made headlines as a lively senior Florida woman who walked the Gasparilla 5K during her 90s and served as Grand Marshal of the parade this year at the age of 100. She is now facing a different challenge involving federal government payments she has received every month for more than 20 years. Quote, "It just stopped and it hasn't started again," unquote, said Ashley. The U.S. Office of Personnel Management is an agency that disperses the payments from the annuity of Ashley's late husband, who served as a U.S. postmaster. When Ashley and her daughter Thelma looked into the 6 months of missing payments, Ashley was asked to prove that she is still alive. Quote, "Someone from OPM said, 'My goodness, she's 100 years old. Why would we think she's still alive?' the daughter said. She did not refer the agent to any episode of The Today Show, specifically the segment where Al Roker congratulates centenarians for reaching and exceeding that milestone on a daily basis. Instead, Ashley sent a notarized form to OBM and a picture of her with a current newspaper. It has not been enough to unlock the payments. "I am alive," Ashley said with a smile. "I'm going to celebrate 101 in June." OPM has not responded to requests for comment. The daughter shared a May email from OPM that stated, quote, "Upon approval, she should receive all missing payments on Friday, May 13th, 2022, unquote. But Friday the 13th was unlucky for Ashley, who is still waiting with a quarterly federal tax bill due in a couple of weeks. Quote, "Those payments helped me pay that tax over the years. The payment went up this time," Ashley said. "It's getting harder and harder to make ends meet." That is a statement that I'm sure many Florida men and women can agree with. In She Doesn't Look Surprised news, a Florida woman is accused of illegally injecting people with Botox in Central Florida, and a doctor allegedly helped her practice medicine without a license. The woman, founder of the Brevard County Coastal Med Spa on North Sykes Creek Parkway on Merritt Island, is now charged with a felony. The doctor she worked with could face disciplinary action. The Florida Department of Health filed a complaint with the Board of Medicine, alleging the doctor signed paperwork stating that the Florida woman was a physician assistant or registered nurse when she was not. The 65-year-old Florida woman now faces a charge of unauthorized practice of a health profession. The Department of Health investigation also alleges that the medical director of Coastal Med Spa signed authorization slips allowing the Florida woman to perform injections on patients, and some of those slips did identify her as a physician assistant or registered nurse. The sheriff's office said a medical assistant, even an unlicensed one, is allowed to provide many services, but Botox or platelet-rich plasma injections are not among them. Deputies said the Florida woman was accused of injecting Botox, PRP, and non-FDA-approved drugs into the joints, neck, and face, all body parts that you want an unlicensed senior citizen poking needles containing botulism into. Due to class privilege, the doctor is not facing charges, but the Florida Department of Health has filed an administrative complaint with the Board of Medicine asking for a penalty to be imposed. The penalties sought for the doctor range from a reprimand and fines to the revocation of his doctor's license. It's almost time for our final story, but first, Florida Man News is a production of the Florida Podcast Network. You can find the show in your favorite podcast app or at FloridaPodcastNetwork.com, on Instagram and Twitter at FLPodcastNet, and you can find me at Joel from Florida. That's at Joel from FL. You can join our Florida Podcast Network Facebook group. Just search for FPN Insiders to get more info on Florida Man news and all our other shows like Techsploration, where host Craig and David explore the innovative technology and interview leaders in the Florida tech industry. Our executive producer is Jemmy Legagneur. Florida Man News is provided for entertainment purposes only. Any similarity to actual persons living or dead or actual events is purely coincidental. No warranty or professional relationship is implied, and no refunds will be granted. Views expressed on this program are solely the opinions of the individuals who express them and do not imply an endorsement by our sponsors, spouses, families, employers, ourselves, or the Florida Board of Tourism. Thanks for listening to Florida Man News. Here's our final story for the week. A tractor-trailer delivery driver is facing possession of methamphetamine charges after crashing into the back of a Publix shopping center in Haines City on Thursday afternoon. The 51-year-old Cape Coral man was making a delivery in the back of the shopping center when his truck tore an awning off the building and hit an unoccupied pickup truck, pushing it about 200 feet. Officers say both vehicles were totaled. When an officer approached the Florida man following the crash, he stated that he thought he was being pranked by a television show and did not immediately come out of the 53-foot tractor. Police say the Florida man's erratic behavior caused a commotion in the shopping center, with many employees and customers showing up to see what was happening. After a few minutes, the officer was able to remove the Florida man from the truck and asked if he had fallen asleep, been drinking, or was experiencing a medical emergency, according to the Haines City Police Department. The Florida man responded, quote, "I was smoking my meth pipe," unquote. "We appreciate the suspect's honest response to the officer's questions," said Haines City Deputy Police Chief Lloyd Stewart, "but using meth is illegal and could have cost someone their life." The Florida man was arrested and charged with possession of methamphetamine, disorderly conduct, resisting arrest without violence, and possession of narcotics paraphernalia. He was not charged with breaking any motor vehicle laws, even though that is what drew the attention of the police in the first place. That's the news from the shady side of the Sunshine State. We'll be back next week with another heaping pile of Florida Man news.